have some big thoughts on AI and the legal practice. Technology in general has been on a big uptick.
There's just delays everywhere.
It was even beat into our heads in law school that all you need is your yellow legal pad and a can-do attitude.
My name is Christian Cooper, and I serve as corporate counsel.
Allison Slotsy, and I manage Gemini's litigation support team.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I have my good friend, Mr. Roscom, who is an immigration attorney out in Texas. He's going to be joining us and talking about the ebbs and flows of the immigration practice. So let's just hop into it.
Absolutely. So my name is Gabriel Roscom. I'm an immigration attorney based out of here in Houston, Texas, and have been now an immigration attorney for close to 4 years. I have been in this practice area mostly focused on the family-based immigration cases. So that includes anything from humanitarian visas to the adjustment of status process, as well as helping people from overseas that want to immigrate to the United States. So I would say that's about half of my practice. The other half primarily involves deportation defense. So that will include people that are currently detained by the U.S. government, and also people that are not detained. So in a nutshell, that's sort of what I do as an immigration lawyer. I grew up in Houston. Houston is my home. I did my undergraduate here at the University of Houston before going to the University of the District of Columbia, where I got my JD, and eventually I got barred in the state of New Mexico. And in a nutshell, that's who I am and what I do. And I'm an attorney that tries to be as interactive and as involved with my clients as much as possible, especially nowadays where immigration law is not only more complicated, but is also something where many of my clients are living in fear, right? So yeah, that's who I am, and that's what I do, and I try to be just, the best attorney that I can be.
Yeah, Gabe, we've known each other. This is going to blow your mind. Let's see. When we get into 16, we've known each other a decade already. Yeah.
Time just goes by so fast, man.
Yeah, and for those who don't know you super well, Gabe has a sweet jumper. This guy can secretly hoop. He doesn't like to tell people, but this guy's got a sweet jumper. So tell me about your practice. Is this your practice? Are you solo? Are you at a firm?
Yeah. So I'm solo. So when I first started out, when I first got barred, I worked for an immigration law firm here in Houston, small firm. The owner of the firm was great. Got a lot of hands-on experience. I think my first merits hearing, which is a trial in immigration law, he just threw me to the wolves, man. He just said, go in there and do your thing.
Yeah, immigration and personal injury. Like, I can't imagine two other practice areas where you don't get thrown to the wolves. How else do you learn there?
How else do you learn? Exactly. Yeah. So I first started off working for that firm, and then eventually I went to a bigger firm. I worked for one of the bigger firms here in the U.S., where primarily I was focused more so on the humanitarian side of the immigration law field, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually, as I gained more experience, I decided on my own that hey, I'm pretty good at this. I'm getting results for my clients. At the time, it was the previous administration, so a lot of the policies that you're seeing now were not in effect, but I was getting results, right? And I felt that I could do it on my own. And eventually, that's when I decided to open up my own law firm. I felt that that I, as an attorney, wanted to be a little bit different in the sense that I wanted to be more involved, more hands-on. If you call my office, 9 times out of 10, my secretary is not the one that's going to answer. It's going to be me, right? And that's kind of uncommon for many attorneys and many law firms. But that's the way that I feel, especially nowadays, where clients need reassurance and they need someone that could kind of be there for them. That's kind of what they need. So yeah.
How great of a guy! How great of a guy is this guy? That's unbelievable. That's one of my favorite things about you. I wonder if it's in our training from UDC to feel that way, or if it's just us personally. I have a funny rep here. I've told everyone in the company, "Oh, I'm not your average attorney," and I feel that in my soul that I'm different. I genuinely care, and I think you genuinely in the deepest of your hearts care about every single thing you do for your clients. Hey, I follow you on social media. I see the things you do. You're really passionate.
Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right, Christian. I think most folks that we went to UDC with, I think, would say the same thing. I think when you're in that environment, you don't only get training in the law, you don't only get your ability to analyze cases and case law, but you also get the social justice aspect of it. And I think
Yes.
it's helped me out, and I think you as well, right? So I think, yeah, exactly right. I think it's a UDC thing as well.
Yeah, and that, if anyone in that, because that school pumps out unbelievable public interest attorneys, but I bring that to my corporate law experience. I genuinely care, and you don't see that too often. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I'm just saying, like, you don't have to go to immigration or a federal practice admin to. You can do it in corporate if you wanted to as well. Look, man, you've been in the thick of things since you've been in immigration. Tell me, these past 12 months or so, what are some bigger developments in the immigration community? The immigration law changes. Do you see differences in the court? Do you see differences in practice manuals? What has changed in a full calendar year for you? Because I'm sure a lot has.
Sure. That's a great question, Christian. Thanks. So I think first and foremost, right, there is 80% to 90% of what you see on social media, on what you see in the media, right, with the detaining of immigrants. I think that's the number one thing. That is happening, right? So what we see in the media, what we see on social media with the detaining of immigrants is occurring. But I think that the number one issue that most of us attorneys are having, and this has been in the last year since the Trump administration took over, is the inability of immigrants that are detained by the United States government, their inability to get a bond. Okay. And the reason why I say this is before, historically, if you're an immigrant and you're in the United States without a status and you are detained by the immigration authorities, historically, you were eligible for a bond if you could meet two important things, right? Number one, if we can prove that you're not a danger to the community, that means that you have good moral character, that you're someone that has not committed any serious crimes. And two, if you're not a flight risk.
Is that any different? I don't know if you're able to speak to this, but that sounds similar to getting a bond in criminal. Do you see a lot of differences there?
I would assume so. I would assume, on the criminal side, there is a similarity in you not being a flight risk or the nature of the crime that you're being charged with, right?
Okay.
Would determine the amount of bond. But historically, for immigrants, if you could fulfill those two things, if you're not a flight risk, right, and you're not a danger to the community, you would be eligible for a bond. So what has happened in the last 7 to 8 months is a case decided by the Board of Immigration Appeals states that if you entered the country without inspection, it doesn't matter if you entered 5 years ago, doesn't matter if you entered 30 years ago. If you enter to the country without inspection, you are now subject to what they call mandatory detention. So essentially what that is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have no crimes on your record. It doesn't matter if you have significant ties to the United States with U.S. citizen children or a U.S. citizen.
And these are factors, right? These are factors you, counsel, would present to show, hey, they should be here, or we can get a green card or a citizenship status. Those, what you just listed, are factors of what you would present.
Factors. Okay. Exactly. So before, those folks would be eligible for a bond. But most recently, with this case done by the BIA, those folks are no longer eligible for a bond. They're subject to mandatory detention and now are essentially having to fight their cases within the detained system and hopefully get the release that way. So I think that's been the most significant change. And I would also like to add, before we get off of the detained stuff, is that now what most attorneys are doing is something called habeas corpus, which I'm sure you've heard of. Christian is
yeah. If you put me in front of a judicial committee, I would be able to tell you what habeas corpus is. Yes.
Yeah. A habeas corpus, which is essentially, it's a federal suit, which says that this person is being unlawfully detained by the U.S. government, right? So that's the way that I have helped some of my clients get released. But for the vast majority of immigrants, unfortunately, that major change in the law is what has affected many, many folks.
Maybe,
Yeah.
and I don't want to put any words in your mouth here, so correct me anywhere I'm trying to regurgitate this, but what percentage of these people, of these individuals, these human beings who are trying to come in legally and have not committed a crime and are being detained, is that a large percentage? Or is that, again, don't let me put words in your mouth there, but it feels like what you just described was a criminal proceeding for someone who's just trying to have a better life.
Right. Yeah. I would say in my practice, in my field, in my area with the vast majority of my clients, I would say that the vast majority, 80 to 90%, are people that enter without inspection. You do have, I would say 20%, not entirely sure on the exact percentages,
Fair.
that entered with a visa, and those folks are still eligible for a bond, right? But that percentage is certainly lower than the vast majority of people that have come through the border and entered without inspection.
Okay,
Yeah.
so am I hearing that in your practice, you've had people who come in through inspection, have a green card, and they go, hey, thanks for checking the boxes. I still need to put you in detention and you need to figure this out behind bars?
So that's a bit more rare, right? So
Okay.
so if you have a green card, right? I'm yet to see someone with a green card detained, but it has happened. It has happened to other attorneys that I've spoken to,
Okay.
and that I know personally, where sometimes the green card holder may have something in their background, right? So just to give an example,
Okay.
perhaps when they filled out their green card application, they checked off a box that should not have been checked off, or that should have been checked off, right?
Sure.
Now the U.S. government is alleging that they committed fraud on the green card application, So, and they could try to take your green card away. Or say, for example, Christian, the person with a green card after receiving their green card, right, then commits a crime, right, which does happen, which then commits a crime, and then that person with the green card is considered ineligible to continue to have that status here in the United States. So what happens is sometimes that person with a green card might want to apply to become a U.S. citizen after having the requirements for it. Um, and when that does happen, then immigration says, wait a minute, you were convicted of this crime. You are no longer eligible to have your green card, and therefore we're going to reject your application to become a citizen and automatically put you in removal proceedings. Give us that green card back. You now have to fight with us to even have your status as a green card holder.
Okay.
So that is also something that is happening. But I think as far as them being detained, with everyone else that is being, I think it is less likely, but it is still happening.
Okay, that's good. And that's great. You're the expert, and I'm the ignorant party here. So that's really good to hear from the horse's mouth that's what you're seeing on the field and boots on the ground. That's how your experience. That's great. I'm curious if, I would love to ask you about California. And I appreciate you won't be able to maybe speak specifically to that because you're out in Texas, but maybe for Texas, are you seeing, due to these immigration changes, trends ticking upwards or downwards, or some type of new social expectations? I hope I'm setting this question up right. In employment law and workers' compensation or labor litigation and unions, are you seeing people maybe more scared to try to fight for their rights in court because of their immigration status?
Great question. 100%, man. Yeah. So I'll give you an example. I'll give you a few examples, right? So here at my firm, we also handle U visas. Okay. U visas are visas where if an immigrant has been the victim of a crime, a qualifying crime, right? So it has to generally be something kind of serious. So when the person is an immigrant, victim of a crime, that person can qualify for a U visa. Now, one of the requirements of the U visa is that a police report must have been made, right? So that means that the immigrant at some point should have called the police if they were the victim of a crime. And then the police make the report, and then with that report, they can then move forward and apply for the U visa, right? Which is a great visa. It takes a long time to get it, but but is a visa that many immigrants have benefited from in the past. What is happening because of the changes in enforcement and because of the aggressive policies put forward by the administration, it has caused many immigrants to forgo calling the police in those situations because we know that in many jurisdictions, in many states, the police are actively working with Immigration Customs and Enforcement, which has caused many immigrants to no longer report those crimes, right? As well as things like Violence Against Women Act, when the person has a spouse that is a U.S. citizen and that spouse is abusive, right? It has also caused many spouses to not want to, get in the bad graces of their U.S. citizen spouse that is being
Yeah, it's a
abusive.
shame.
And as far as when it comes to like personal injury, workers' comp, I would assume it is also affecting that area as well
Yeah, and I can
because
speak to California. Workers' compensation claims upon this new administration implementing their rules just tanked here in California. Went whoa, and I don't know if you saw any of that. And I know you're not on workers' compensation, but I don't know if you saw any of those trends out in Texas. And I got to imagine Texas is maybe the number 2 state in the country for immigrants. People just too scared to go get things that are afforded to them.
yeah, exactly. Too afraid, and I think sometimes as well, you will have here and there nefarious employers that don't want to or that pressure immigrants to not, pursue whatever relief they can obtain because of their immigration status. It's truly a sad situation overall. Yeah, yeah.
So you spoke to some of the changes that have happened currently. What do you see, at least through, and I appreciate you can't predict 10, 20 years in the future, because immigration, like most admin law adjacent practices, are really reliant on the current administration. So for the remaining years of the administration, do you have any predictions of where policy, at least on a federal perspective, may be going?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think so. Most of what we're seeing, right, as I
Mhm.
mentioned, is the enforcement with clients that are or prospective clients and immigrants that are currently without a status, right? Now, what I believe is already happening, and I think it's going to continue for the next 3 years, is the administration continuing to target legal migration. Okay. So when I say legal, I mean people that would come to the United States on a business visa,
Mhm.
right? Um, Folks that would immigrate the right way, as I don't want to make it political, but folks that would come to the United States for a specific purpose or have been in line for years and years and want to immigrate to the United States.
Yeah, and I don't think where you're going to is political in nature. You're just, what I'm hearing you say is people who check the right boxes on the right forms and have done it in a path that was outlined
Yes,
for them.
exactly. Yes. So I think that that's the case, and I'll tell you why. The first, I'm not sure if you remember back in September 2025 of last year, where they detained over 300 South Korean workers at that Hyundai plant in Georgia. It came out
Mm,
on the news. It was
okay.
pretty big. So many of those South Korean workers were here on business visas, and they were still detained by Immigration Customs and Enforcement. So that's a way of the administration saying, hey, doesn't matter if you're um, here illegally or without a status, or you're here with a status, there is a chance that we are going to go after you, right? And I think the
Okay.
second example would be the more recent one on January 26th or the 29th of this year, if I'm not mistaken. The administration announced the 75 country ban that would essentially halt immigrant visas from 75 countries that the administration deems as being from countries or people that would be heavily reliant on U.S. benefits.
Mhm.
So that tells me that the trend in the next few years will not only be with undocumented migrants and folks that don't have a status, but also that the United States government will likely continue to try and restrict legal migration into the United States. Yeah,
How do,
that's my
how do
prediction.
you combat something like that? I guess just voting, you doing your civil duty as a citizen.
Sure. I think there's a lot of challenges in courts now. I think
Okay.
that so the legal challenges, the courts have done, I think, an enormous job in trying to fight back at many of the things that the executive is doing. Like, say, for example, I think one of the more crazy ones is the birthright citizenship thing, right? Obviously, the president can't just say, if you were born to immigrants in the United States, you are no longer a U.S. citizen, right? There has to be a constitutional process, right?
Mm.
Because we're the United States of America at the end of the day. Um, but yeah, I think that voting certainly is an important part of it. But I think as of right now, the only way to kind of change this or try to push back on some of these more draconian policies would be the courts, but also the people continuing to march and to continue to have their voices heard.
I have to imagine the courts are overwhelmed, and I don't mean just like on a personal level. I mean groups too, efforts litigating on behalf of others. How does one? I don't know if you're able to address this, but how do the courts in your world address something like that? Because there have to be so many closely aligned cases over so many different jurisdictions. They're all fighting the same thing, but they're adhering to different federal rules because they're in a different district. How, how do they, if at all, attempt to combat that? Isn't that just a strategy to just overwhelm the courts then? To say, hey, look, we're going to tie this up in court for 4 years, and then after that, it won't matter.
Yeah, yeah. I think the strategy for some is to delay, right? And I say that because, I've been in immigration court now several times, and I think many judges are willing to be more, compassionate and will push out a case further out, right? But we also have to remember that many judges are also under a lot of pressure from
Yeah.
the administration. I think many judges have lost their jobs. I think it's something like more than 100 immigration judges have been fired from the administration. Um, so I think as a whole, the immigration judges are certainly feeling a lot of pressure with many of these cases, right?
This is it an immigration judge a position one applies to? That's not an appointment where you're locked in and you're like, hey, I have this job for 20 years. They can be let go.
They can be let go, yeah,
Oh,
by the executive, yeah.
oh,
Yep.
learn something new every day.
Yeah, yeah. So it's something where I believe the immigration judges are under a lot of pressure,
Yeah.
right? So what happens is, you know, as an immigration attorney, I think you do see, them not being as fair.
Well, yeah. How do you not inherently have bias when you're not just getting a check from the federal government?
Sure.
That's your
That's your
boss.
benefits, your livelihood.
Yeah, because if you get, let's use the Supreme Court. You get appointed to the Supreme Court. The U.S. government may be cutting you a check for your pay, but you do whatever you want to do there, right? What you do is your own mind, and you're appointed to have that mind sitting on that bench. How is there not a bias by having these immigration judges say, "Oh, I'm just a W-2 employee, and I can be let go whenever if the government doesn't like what I'm doing."
And you know what, Christian? A lot of immigration judges, those that are no longer working, as an immigration judge, a lot of those judges are speaking out, and they're saying what I'm saying. They're saying, it's a difficult system to operate in, right? This is not something that I signed up for, right? And I think it's true. I think a lot of what is happening is terrible, but I think that's where we see the effects of what's going on for sure.
Yeah, I do not envy that position where one feels an effective way to fight that is stepping down, whereas staying in that position, you individual who's stepping down may be the best person to litigate these matters. That's a double-edged sword. I hope I never have to face personally. That's brutal. That's really difficult. Do you see in your practice, and maybe not your firm specifically, but in how you engage in immigration affecting other courts, areas of practice, does your immigration ever get in the way of your client's personal injury case? Maybe they're a part of a business, but they're here illegally, and it affects their corporate case, their civil cases. Does your immigration case ever overlap with other litigation?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure, it certainly does. I think
Oh,
we haven't had many. Let me see if I'm answering the question correctly, man. We haven't had many clients that are also simultaneously having like a personal injury case.
okay.
But we have had many clients that are simultaneously having a criminal case, for example,
Okay.
or a divorce case, right?
Sure.
In family law or or things of that nature, right? So
Mhm.
that certainly there's tons of overlap. Um, and 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 the reason why that's important is because in those areas of law, and I would assume also in workers' comp and in personal injury, um, th the effects of those cases will certainly have an effect on the immigration case. Okay. So say for example, just an example, if a person is going through an adjustment of status case where they would like
Mhm.
to get their green card, but that adjustment of status is based on their marriage to a U.S. citizen. That divorce to that U.S. citizen cuts off that green card. No more green card, right? And same with criminal. If you commit a crime that doesn't make you eligible for a benefit, then the crime that you committed or are being charged with will certainly have an effect on your ability to obtain your immigration benefit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that for sure. I understand that line of thinking. Do you ever have to, is that something you as an immigration attorney, those other matters, step into, or do you just work concurrently with co-counsel? What does your role look like in that relationship?
Sure. Yeah. So what most of those clients do is, so they have two attorneys, right? They'll have the attorney that's working on the personal injury matter
Mhm.
or the family case or
Sure.
the criminal case, right? And many times what will happen is that attorney will then contact my office and say, hey, we have this mutual client, or my client would like to know these answers about their immigration case. How can I work with you to kind of figure out how his case with my firm will affect him and his immigration status? So generally, it's a working together relationship between the attorneys handling one type of case and myself as an immigration attorney that just has to figure out how the specific client's situation
Mhm.
can affect their immigration status moving forward and what the risks are. It's mostly
Okay.
about risk. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's most of an attorney's role is how do I mitigate this
Kind of
risk?
mitigate the risk. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh, how does one like yourself, as much as I would like to say, every attorney has to stay abreast with new changes in the law, how does someone in immigration where things change on a dime and they change constantly, how do you stay up to date? Do you have tips and tricks, or do you go, no, I have this legal Bible essentially. I follow this thing to a T and I do not. What does that look like in your world?
Sure, man, sure. So I think with immigration law, like you said, it's something where it's changing every week, man. I mean,
Mhm.
this is something that is insane because one day, you could be in a position where you have a really strong case and nothing wrong with it, and you're going to move forward and it's going to be a good outcome. But the next day, it can be a super big risk for your client, and
I
then
can't
you're in a
imagine.
position where you got to be like, hey, do you want me to refund you your money, or what do you want me to do here, right? So I think first and foremost, and I think as young attorneys, right, people that just started in this field, in this career,
Mhm.
first and foremost, it's important to have mentors, right? So having a mentor, having an attorney in your back pocket that can say,
Yeah.
this is what I think, right? This is what I think, and this is based on my experience. I think that's super important. And also, it kind of gives you reassurance because I can tell you more often than not, I find myself in a situation where I'm like, am I doing this right? I mean, I'm confident that 9 times out of 10 I am. I've researched it. I've gone through the practice manual. I have I have done my diligence to figure out that I'm doing the right thing. But sometimes having a mentor, having an attorney that's seasoned that can point you in the right direction is important. And that's I think first and foremost is having a mentor. Second, I think is being involved in organizations
Yes.
that provide these resources. So for immigration attorneys, we follow something called AILA, which is the American Immigration Lawyers Association, where they have webinars, they have AILA conferences, and I'm pretty busy with my firm, but I try to be involved and I try to keep up to date with their newsletters as much as I can because they're pretty good at telling you, you know, this change just happened,
That's
right?
got to be really
February
cool
18th.
being part of
Yeah,
a practice area where I imagine an overwhelming majority of the attorneys in that practice area are extremely passionate about it. So you're almost like sharing the responsibility in this group that, hey, since we're also passionate, there's another responsibility to keep everyone up to date. That's really cool. And I think you only find that in really nuanced practice areas like immigration.
sure.
I think in business, I'm sure maybe even in personal injury, people like to hide the ball. I'm making a lot of money over here. I don't want to tell everyone how I'm doing it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But in immigration, it's no, these are human beings and we're out here to protect everyone.
We're trying to help out. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And that's a good point. I think in immigration law you do see a lot of community with different attorneys. You see a lot of attorneys willing to lend a helping hand, and not just say, "Hey, look, you're my competition. I don't want to help you out." You know what I mean? So yeah, so that's a good point.
I
Yeah.
think the mentor is an unbelievable comment. I got a mentor the second I graduated, and that gentleman I still converse with to this day to make sure if I have a question, I have someone I can confidently go to and say, am I doing this right? Because sometimes it can get isolating in the attorney world. You run a solo practice is what it sounds like, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah, exactly.
got to be hard to find people constantly willing to give you tips and tricks of how to succeed. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
then you have your groups. We here in California we have our groups too. And Gemini Legal we wrote a quick reference guide for workers' compensation. So if anyone wanted to hop into the game in workers' compensation, they can basically get this. I jokingly call it the workers' compensation Bible. You can just pick it up and flick to a page and go, this is how I do that thing and I can be successful in it. And without, treatises like that or these textbooks, I would be lost.
Yeah.
I have to ask you, hot topic, AI.
AI.
Do
Yeah.
you utilize it? How does it come into the practice of immigration as a attorney, the practitioner, as well as you, the business owner, two separate hats here? Do you utilize it at all in either facet?
I try to sometimes.
Okay.
So I have a software that I'm using called Clio. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Oh, I'm extremely well versed in it.
Clio, and I just got it not that long ago. And
You
there's
just got Clio? You're late to the
a
game, my
newbie.
friend.
I'm a newbie, man. I'm a newbie.
We used Clio in our clinics.
We did, right?
We
Yeah,
did.
that's right.
Yeah, you have some exposure to it.
Yeah, yeah. So AI, I have used off and on. I think at times I find myself a bit paranoid with it.
I think I think your spidey sense there is good.
Only because sometimes there's been times, and I'm guilty of this. I've looked up stuff, right? I mean, what do I do with this specific thing? And
Yeah,
AI
yeah.
will give me an answer, and then I will say, you know what? I need to check that with my official source, my Kurzban books or something. And then it says something that's close to being right, but not exactly right. So
Yeah.
I try to just, I think AI is wonderful for things that can help out as far as like typing up an email or getting something really, quickly done. But as far as like the legal stuff goes, I do use it at times, right? But I also try to be very careful. I try to, do my diligence and try to figure out whether I'm doing things that are right at the end of the day. But I think as this continues to advance, and I think AI, as we can see, is moving at a pace where it's scary, man. I mean,
Yeah, it's light speed, man.
you
Yeah.
know, I think eventually it's going to get to a point where more attorneys like myself and people in other areas of law and really other in other areas in general are going to be using or be heavily reliant on AI as much as they can be.
And I think some people are scared of it in the workforce, but us attorneys can use it to really bootstrap your business to feel like a medium or big law firm because you've got AI backing you up.
And it does things quickly. It does things quickly, and you would have saved costs, I assume, as well, right? So that's good, man.
Yeah. Remind me, my brain wants to say you're bilingual.
I am.
Yeah,
I am. Yeah.
What other language do you speak?
Spanish. Español.
Do you find?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that helps, but how would one being an immigration attorney, build trust in an immigrant community where, hey, you are a U.S. citizen, and you're an outsider to that world stepping in. How does someone, maybe not, and I'm not trying to reference you, the individual, but how does someone step into that role and go, hey, I'm really passionate about immigration law. How do they find the confidence to go into a community and say, hey, I know I'm not part of this, but I'm here to help?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So I think first and foremost, right? I think what we are seeing nowadays, with everything that's been going on for the last 12 months or so, I think it's important for communities and immigration attorneys, especially, to assure clients that despite everything that's going on, that under the United States Constitution, they still have rights, right? And that, now is the time for folks to be more aware of those rights than ever before, right? So first and foremost, I think with a community, you have to kind of reassure them. Immigrants, you have to say, hey, look, what we are going through is fearful, it's scary, but rest assured that there are still laws in this country, and also rest assured that as an advocate for immigrants, that we have your back at the end of the day, and we're going to use the law in ways that are going to benefit you, right? So I try to assure my clients that is I try to make them feel like I know things are scary, I know things seem dire, but at the end of the day, you still have rights in this country, and don't be afraid. It's just a matter of you knowing your rights. And
that's got to be so hard to instill. The don't be afraid part. And my heart goes out to everyone working in that world or personally experiencing that. That's a hard thing to sell. Don't be afraid, I'm here.
Exactly. And I think the second thing is having a backup plan. And this is what I tell all of my clients nowadays. Yeah. I tell them, I say, have a backup plan because we just don't know, right? If you've been in the country, right, more than 15, 20 years, you've lived a comfortable life here in the United States, we have seen that, things have changed, right? So have a backup plan. And when I say a backup plan, I mean have a relative, a friend that you can trust, especially those, especially if you have children that are underage. Have someone that you can trust that can get in communication with your family and with an attorney in the event that something was to happen. So I think first and foremost is trying to provide them reassurance, but also being realistic with them and telling them, hey, look, have a backup plan because we know that immigration enforcement these days is aggressive, and you just don't want to be caught in a situation where, I'll give you an example, where you're working, you're detained, and the children are at school, right? Your young children are at school, and their parents don't pick them up, and next thing you don't know where the person is, and it's just a situation that can snowball and can be very, very difficult if you don't have a plan. So I would say those are the two main things, letting immigrants know, letting the immigrant community know that that you have their back, and that this is a process that many people in the country are going through, and at the end of the day, as an attorney and as an advocate, that you have their back, right? Second, I would say is let them know that it's important to have a backup plan, to be realistic in a situation where we know that immigration enforcement is being very aggressive. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you would know the answer to this, but is there any proposed legislation, proposed regulations coming down the pipeline that you're preparing for?
Yeah, so as of right now, I think the main thing that we've been seeing with immigration, is a change to the bond, right? So many people are fighting back on the bond. There was a recent case out of the Fifth Circuit, that said that the controlling case, the BIA, the one we spoke about earlier, was controlling. This was like a week ago, man. That said that that case is controlling. So that actually makes it much harder to even now after habeas to even try to get a bond for these clients. But as far as these changes go in the future, we've also seen a lot of changes to DACA. Most recently, there was one where there was a change in DACA, which is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, that would allow DACA applications to continue to be accepted because they were put on pause for many years. Yeah, they were put on pause. So if you qualified for DACA, your application was essentially, it could be submitted.
Are these are the dreamers?
These are the dreamers, correct? Yeah, exactly, man. Yeah. So the dreamers, their applications were actually put on pause for many years. The initial ones. So those that already had DACA were able to renew it. But those that were initial applicants were essentially being put on hold. Now those applications are now starting to be processed again, as far as I know. So I assume that there's also, especially after the November elections, I'm hoping there's a lot of pressure on lawmakers to ensure that those folks, those dreamers, do have a pathway. And eventually, I think they eventually will. Yeah.
Okay. I don't believe I got from you in the beginning. How does the world contact Mr. Roscom? So you have your own firm. What's the name of your firm? Tell me a little about it. What's your website? Where can I find you?
Sure. So we can be found at so our firm's name is Roscom Immigration Law. We were established approximately a year ago.
Wow! Congratulations, man.
So we have our 1-year anniversary coming up. Roscom Immigration Law.
I'm gonna have to send you a bottle of wine from Napa out here.
Dude, you do, man, you do. So we can be found at www.abogadogar.com. That's officially our website for the firm. And yeah, that's our firm. We operate out of Houston, Texas, and yeah.
Is your being a federal practice, can you bounce around, or do you have to wave in to like a New Mexico to help an immigration case out there, or can you, federal practitioner, walk over and?
No, federal, we can do in 50 states. Every state we can take
Beautiful.
cases. So that's
beautiful.
So that's the beauty of immigration, man, is we can I can take cases in California, I can take cases in New York.
You say that's the beauty of immigration, but I say that's the beauty of how that system is set up so good people like yourself can go help a lot of people across the country.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the way it's been, and that's good, right? I do think that sometimes, taking cases in other jurisdictions is tough, right? Because if the judge wants you to be there in person, right? But other than that, it's great because you also get exposure to many different judges, and sometimes, I'll give you an example, judges in California might be a little bit nicer, right? to your clients as opposed to the judges here in Texas, right?
Okay.
So it's good, man. So you definitely get a lot of experience, and you can handle cases in every state.
Well, that's exciting. I know you're a busy man. I know you have more meetings coming up nonstop, I'm sure, as a solo practitioner. So let bid you adieu. Thank you so much for joining us here. You've done me a huge favor. You've done Gemini a huge favor. Thank you, Mr. Roscom. Any parting words for our hundreds of millions of viewers who are watching this?
Well, thank you so much, Christian, and everyone else at Gemini Legal. Thank you so much for the opportunity to answer some questions this afternoon. And I hope that and I hope that through my answers, you guys were able to learn a little bit more about immigration,
Yes.
but also immigrants as a whole, and the fight that we're all in, right? And eventually, hopefully, there's going to be brighter days ahead. So thank you
Wise
so much.
words that we're all in. I love that. Yes, we are all part of this. It is a collective effort.